Whatever else happens from this day forward, in the effort to cover and hold accountable Donald Trump and his cabinet, the individuals who testified before today gave us something we've never had before, firsthand witness accounts of, well, let's quote them, of an attempt to, quote, be executed by my own government. The testimony came from Miramar Martinez, or by Aliyah Rahman, who gave us our first testimony of how detainees inside the Whipple building are described. Quote, they're bringing in bodies. Quote, there's a body in there already. We need another room for this body. Martin Daniel Rascon, the last individual testifying there, describing the scene. Weapons and armored trucks outside his house, night vision goggles, guns pointed at them. Quote, pure terror for his family. All of them U.S. citizens. So if you think this story is a story about something happening far away, or if you think that what ICE is doing doesn't affect you or couldn't affect you, if you think you can drive into an intersection, as Aliyah did, and was, quote, cut out of her car with a knife thrown onto her face, you're wrong. Stories about all of us. All this is being done in our name to other American citizens. Joining our coverage, former Assistant Special Agent in Charge at the FBI, National Security and Intelligence Analyst, Michael Feinberg's here. He's also a fellow at Lawfare. Also joining us, former DHS Chief of Staff during Donald Trump's first term as president, Miles Taylor's here. And immigration correspondent for NPR, Jasmine Guard is here. She is just back from reporting on the ground in Minneapolis. We're also joined by Democratic Congressman Joaquin Castro of Texas. Congressman, I want to start with you. You're here to talk about efforts to return Liam Ramos to his family. A 5-year-old boy used as bait to try to entrap his mother, who was inside his house. A good news story in a sea of so much horror.
Yeah, it was wonderful to be able to take he and his father back to Minnesota from rural Texas, from Dilley, Texas. But his story is just one of hundreds of children who are in detention right now, including a 2-month-old baby who's been there for several days, and kids of all ages who are suffering incredible trauma. And the testimony that we just heard talks about the brutality, the physical brutality that we're seeing from ICE on the streets. But there is also a physical and psychological brutality going on inside detention centers, leaving scars for kids that will last them a lifetime.
The judge was scathing in his rebuke of the seizing of Liam Ramos and his father. He was also able to tell a story about the traumatic damage that ICE is doing to children. What is your sense of why that damage, as seen so clearly by this judge in this case, hasn't been able to stop the practice of detaining children and keeping them in these conditions?
I think that Donald Trump and Stephen Miller and others in the administration are determined to carry out this very brutal, often unconstitutional mass deportation machine. And for the American people, they're seeing what's going on in the streets. And I think that with the murder of Alex Preddy, for example, it shocked the conscience. And the story of Liam Conejo Ramos also shocked the conscience and captured the attention of the country and the world about what's going on. But yeah, I mean, there are more people out there who are suffering. And those of us that believe this is wrong, whether you're a Republican or Democrat, need to continue to fight this system right now.
I asked this question the day that Renee Nicole Good was killed. If this is how American citizens are being treated in broad daylight with dozens, sometimes hundreds of people watching, what is your best answer to how asylum seekers and immigrants and migrants are being treated without cameras and without accountability and without scrutiny inside detention centers?
I think that there are people that are being brutalized, that are being physically hurt and also psychologically damaged. It is a very vicious system that is set up right now and that they're carrying out. And I do think that we're going to look back upon this time as a shameful period in American history where we let our guard down in terms of protecting people's constitutional and human rights.
Congressman Joaquin Castro, thank you for the work that you did with your colleagues to bring Liam Ramos back, as we said at the top. Sort of a rare good news, good guys winning story. Thank you for your role in that, for joining us to talk about it.
Thank you.
Miles Taylor, I was going to ask you what this agency was that showed up at Martin Daniel Rascon's house. HSI, Homeland Security Investigators. Why would all those units have been at his home?
It's a great question, Nicole. It's a question we're going to be asking is DHS has now taken this investigative agency within ICE, Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, and turned it into another arm of the administration's oppression. In fact, I will add a data point in here, Nicole. A lot of people didn't notice this, but in the reporting about the arrest of reporter Don Lemon, it wasn't just the FBI that was there. It was HSI. What on earth is an investigative agency that's supposed to be focused on foreign threats doing, helping to arrest American journalists? And you and I talked about this a little bit the other day. I think you can say, in all seriousness, that DHS is now spending more time, more effort, and more money undermining U.S. Homeland Security than protecting it. And the trust, of course, because of all of these incidents, has evaporated in the agency, and for good reason. They have destroyed the reputation, whatever was left of it, not just of the agency ICE, but of the whole of the department. And as you and I talked about before, I think for that reason, it can no longer exist. Not in this form, not without accountability, not without measures to prevent them from acting like a lawless secret police. So I think, Nicole, the only silver lining here is that is now a realization that's no longer a fringe realization in American politics. That's a mainstream position. It's a mainstream position now that because of this, we have got to deconstruct that department and reconstruct it. It's gotten that bad. And I can't listen to testimony like you played at the top of the show and think there's any other path.
Yeah, I mean, an American citizen testifying to this, Michael Feinberg, quote, "My own government tried to execute me." She was shot 5 times. She described her injuries. She described her, quote, disfigurement. She described how even with all of that trauma, physical and mental, she knows that Alex Preddy and Renee Nicole Good would trade places to be back with their loved ones. We have a body count in terms of the number of American citizens who have paid with their lives for exercising their First Amendment rights.
Yeah, the thing that struck me the most about the testimony, which we just heard, is that those victims of ICE were able to understand and articulate a greater understanding of the ideals and promises upon which this country was founded than I've ever heard come out of Kristi Noem's mouth or out of Stephen Miller's mouth. I'm as resolutely pro-law enforcement as they come. I carried a badge and a gun for most of my adult career. But I want to echo what Miles said as he was speaking. We have gotten to the point where the rot at DHS is so pervasive and so deep into the structure of the organization that I think we need to have a very serious, very sober conversation as a nation about how in the long term we dismantle this department. Because what they are doing is nothing that I or any of my former colleagues would recognize as law enforcement. What they are doing is simply meting out state-sanctioned barbarism and cruelty.
Fact number 1, Republicans fear that Donald Trump's obviously widely unpopular second term is dragging them down towards what could be a midterm loss or full-blown rout. Fact number 2, President Trump's administration is now blatantly pushing these abuses of power, some of them unconstitutional, to change that trajectory, not by actually winning more votes, which is what everyone's encouraged to do in a democracy that uses the rule of law, but no, to change it through pressure, through government force, through possibly illegal prosecutions of their perceived foes, not by offering a popular agenda to win more votes. And it is that very clear contrast between where our democracy could be headed, and no one knows what will happen in the midterms. I'm just telling you what even the Republican Party chair said, that they're bracing for a loss. That's what's happening in our actual lived democracy and the indicators we have, plus Republican losses in November. And then these efforts, some of them possibly on the line, possibly just sort of pushing and squeezing and testing, and some of them, as we've told you, because we'll always keep it real and factual with you, some of them obviously flatly unconstitutional on the other lane. We're talking about attacks on U.S. guardrails from elections to free speech, including what we have here tonight. This is the first time we're seeing, through new body cam video, what was clearly a troubled and chaotic scene as Donald Trump's FBI agents went to seize ballots in Georgia. We have the video from reporting by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. The FBI approached in a way that clearly left the local officials concerned about not only the unusual federal raid for old ballots from a long-resolved race, but also whether this legally required Trump FBI warrant was even valid.
So did anybody get a physical copy of the search warrant?
No.
When did they get here?
About 12:30.
Just unannounced?
Unannounced.
Then the FBI, represented through these agents we have in the video, they seem to admit a warrant was at least off. I say that broadly because, again, we're working off the video. We don't have all the materials. But it was off enough that it required, they admitted, amending to even be valid.
The warrant will be amended slightly, but for all intents and purposes, what they had is what it's going to look like. We wanted to let her facilitate us moving through the building to unlock the gates so that we don't have to breach it, because one way or the other, the records are coming with us today.
One way or the other, the records are coming with us. Now, if you've ever wondered, if you've never dealt with an agent, whether it's federal or police coming in, that's how they are, that's how they talk. There is a process for this, but they don't sound like they're negotiating. It may be that there were not problems with the underlying warrant that would make it invalid. That's something lawyers can litigate. It may be slight amendments, which could be okay. It may also be that this whole case blows up in Donald Trump's face in the long run because there isn't a lot of precedent for digging through 6-year-old ballots from an election you lost, where the only known convictions related to that election are from the loser of the election, Donald Trump, and his team. Indeed, his lawyers were sanctioned in Georgia and elsewhere. But more clearly, what I want you to understand tonight is that video shows the power of your federal government, of armed federal agents, seizing ballots from an election settled, as I mentioned, 6 long years ago. Now, Donald Trump was the loser of that election in Georgia and, of course, the entire election that year. He lost to Joe Biden. So I say to you, as a news anchor following these stories and always trying to remain calm, what the heck are we doing 6 years later on this of all things? Because you're allowed to debate and talk about whatever you want in America. That's a great thing. You are not allowed to use, abuse, or misuse federal resources because you lost an election. Indeed, while we don't know everything, and I've been careful to state that, in the long run, this is exactly the kind of case that may, like other revenge cases, go up in smoke. But Trump is, 6 years later, directing his government to focus on this, his loss, why he was the loser in Georgia and the loser nationally, which, of course, snowballed into his efforts to join those later convicted thugs who attacked police on Jan 6, and then he pardoned them all. This is all part of that. The lawbreaking we know of is on his side, not the other. And he's focused on this rather than, say, fighting crime or lowering prices or any of the number of promises he vowed in his election to work on. This is what he's focused on. And quite personally, I don't say he, like his administration, and then we're kind of filling in all the gaps. No, Donald Trump, new reporting, personally involved in this, taking the step of talking to some of those agents, we saw one of them on camera, by speakerphone after the raid. That's unusual. We don't believe the president would usually have all the FBI agents' numbers or place those calls. There is a chain of command, but he did it through an intelligence official and questioned them and praised them and thanked them for working on this inquiry through, as the Times puts it, this unusual call. And that may involve another violation because the National Intelligence Director, Gabbard, was on site and facilitated that call. It's not clear how her foreign intelligence authority would relate to meddling in a long-finished domestic election where her boss lost. She's also, we should note, facing a pending classified whistleblower complaint. Now, just to put this in context, efforts by the president to abuse military or intelligence powers for domestic politics, that's not allowed. That's part of what ended Nixon's presidency. And for those who are skeptical, you might say, well, in the beginning with Nixon, people said, well, I guess he's getting away with it. And he was. That's what happens when powerful people break rules. In the end, he didn't. In the end, many of his aides got in trouble. Some went to prison. Here we are at this moment with some of this stuff spilling out. And the question again being, will there be accountability or not? But Trump is more blatant than Nixon ever was about these violations. He's also making an unconstitutional public demand to try to get the feds to oversee elections in places where Republicans are losing. Now, that is also a no-go. And it's important in these times where people are trying to figure out where is the line and they're testing it. The Republican Senate leader speaking out today saying, no, the president cannot do that. For all the questions about when and how Republicans stand up, or will they just say the obvious, Senator Thune did. Because this isn't even allowed. So he may be confident Trump won't do it, can't do it. There aren't the mechanisms necessarily to do it. But before I even show what Trump's saying and fact check it, I just want to give you the constitutional limits. Because the Constitution gives states the power to decide the, quote, times, places, and manner of holding elections and appointing electors for the presidential election. After the states do that, they are in the lead. Congress may alter some of the state rules. The president cannot seize or nationalize anything. The president does have a lot of power, and we've seen that in foreign policy. If he wants to go use war powers against Venezuela in real time, we don't see anything stopping him. But the Constitution does stop him and give these other extraordinary powers to the states. And you don't need to be a constitutional scholar to follow the logic. The founders were worried about despots and kings. They were not going to give the president, who is the more unitary officer, control over the elections when they were just standing up this new thing called elections that would try to remove people from power. So they weren't kings. So it's kind of like, duh, of course the president cannot and does not oversee his own election or powers. Now I'm going to show you, as promised, Donald Trump's unlawful claim in a recent podcast with a former FBI employee that didn't last that long in this administration, with the facts in the Constitution.
The Republicans should say, we want to take over. We should take over the voting in at least 15 places. The Republicans ought to nationalize the voting. And we have states that are so crooked, and they're counting votes. We have states that I won that show I didn't win. Now you're going to see something in Georgia.
And on he went. The legal fact check is more important. He's talking about something he cannot do, and that Senate Leader Thune agreed today he cannot do, but he will potentially try to see how far he can go. He also lost Georgia. Fact check. The president was false in that claim. And we know that he knows because he was the one making calls, furtively trying to get extra votes. Why did he need extra votes? Because he knew he didn't have them, because he lost. The Constitution bars all of that. Donald Trump doubled down on some of those remarks today as well when asked by reporters. I'm not going to show you that because we've already fact-checked it, and that's enough in terms of our news standards. These are Donald Trump's policies. He is responsible for how his policies are turned into action. The masked menacing, the rampant escalation in violence, the clearly avoidable killings. And the agent looks back on it and says, blank happens. But it doesn't just happen. This is your government. And these are your tax dollars. There is a big accountability mechanism above all others. It is obviously elections. And there are people who are concerned, understandably so, about the efforts I just detailed to try to undermine these elections. And yet, on the other hand, we do have some recent examples. Donald Trump was president when he lost the election at the end of the first term. It's the one he's still reinvestigating. And although major pressure was put in the first modern insurrection of our history, Even amid all that, ultimately, he did leave office, just not peacefully. And we had elections in November, and they transpired. And now the question is, heading in this November, towards this November, why is the President of the United States testing whether he can federalize or nationalize elections? Why is he testing his powers to go seize ballots, once for the past, maybe next time for the present? It is a very real stress test of our democracy. The fact that it can be beat doesn't mean that there are losses along the way. We just showed some of the testimony from human beings hurt or killed in ways that the vast majority of law enforcement experts say were at least avoidable, if not important to investigate as potentially crimes. So that is the stakes of where we are at.
Marimar Martinez could have been my sister, my cousin, or any family member on their way to church, who they think they're going to have a regular day, go to their church where they find sanctuary, and then go about their day. Marimar's life was changed forever. We have seen the siege in Chicago for a very long time. And if you ask people in Chicago, the rapid responders, the people in the streets with whistles and phones, what they saw in Minnesota was inevitable, because we have an agency of terror that calls U.S. citizens domestic terrorists. They try to execute them, and then they lie about it.
Jacob, just watching this forum today, I think the word is right. It was harrowing. It was something that when it was on the screen, it felt like we were watching a Truth and Reconciliation Commission from a despotic nation that had undergone decades of human rights abuses. That's what it reminded me of. Is this coming from Chile under Pinochet? Is this coming from South Africa during apartheid? That's what it felt like. Congressman Garcia, he had this exchange when he was talking about the text messages that were sent after an incident. Take a listen.
Ms. Martinez, these are images of texts sent by the agent who shot you. And they're actually disturbing to read, but I think it's important for the public to see this. The agent linked an article about your shooting and texted, "Read it. 5 shots, 7 holes. I fired 5 rounds and she had 7 holes. Put that in your book, boys." Oh, well, it is what it is. It happens. This is someone that works for the United States government.
And that's where I come to you. This is someone who does work for the United States government. This is someone who's supposed to put the laws of this country at the forefront of their job to ensure our peace and our prosperity. And it seems now as if Americans are under attack.
We bleeped it, but let's just say what it said. The text said, "Shit happens." These were agents of the federal government who shot someone 5 times and bragged about it making 7 holes in Miss Martinez's body. And maybe you've been living under a rock. I doubt the people that are watching us right now have been. But if you had any question about what was happening on the streets of the United States, if they were targeting this administration, the so-called worst of the worst, it's obvious by watching today that this was anything but. This is wide scale, it is indiscriminate, and it is targeting American citizens. Ms. Rahman, the story she told was not just that she was going to an appointment, her 39th appointment for a traumatic brain injury, and she told the story of being ripped out of her car. A combat knife, she said, was used to cut off her seatbelt. She said she is autistic and couldn't follow the instructions of the agents, but in her words, and I'm paraphrasing, they didn't care. And the thing I thought that was most beautiful about her testimony today is that she said, you know, Alicia read how deadly it's been inside ICE detention, inside the federal detention centers for these immigrants. She said that she wanted to be there because she had the privilege of speaking out for those who couldn't and were still inside the Whipple building in Minneapolis, going through under the thumb of this largest mass deportation campaign in American history. And what was made very clear today, not that it's any better at all, but that American citizens are being rounded up subject to abuse. Ms. Martinez was charged with a crime that was later dropped. There were other people that testified today that were charged with a crime that were later dropped, yet they went through all of this anyway. And that's what's playing out on the streets of the United States to American citizens today in the name of mass deportation.
I think there are a lot of people who listened to what happened today on Capitol Hill and have an increased frustration with members of Congress who think it is going to be enough to tinker on the margins, to talk about training, instead of to really reckon with just how broken this system is, these institutions are. You have been crystal clear from the beginning. You have been screaming from mountaintops since the beginning of this administration. So I want to give you credit where credit is due. And tomorrow you are taking action. Tell me about the piece of legislation that you're bringing to the floor and why you think these marginal changes are not enough to actually affect change.
Alicia, this is not a training problem. The guy that executed, the agent that executed Alex had years under ICE with training. The reality is that the agency under Department of Homeland Security was created to have qualified immunity in the name of protecting us from domestic terrorism. We created this agency. Before 2003, we didn't have ICE. They didn't operate the way they do. What you're seeing CBP agents do in interior cities like Chicago, like Minnesota, they have been doing to immigrants for a very long time, except there were no phones or whistles to be able to protect them. This is exactly why we have to stop talking about basic reforms. Or, Christine, I'm talking about body cameras that they're not going to release footage for. Marimar is demanding for footage to show what they did to her. The point is we need to melt ICE. We can't talk about a reform of basics. The people are demanding we stop the killing of people, the abduction of children. My bill will prohibit detention, the monitoring you're seeing, and redirect the money that they're using, the billions of dollars, to put back into the communities that have been most impacted. That, to me, is where we need to be. That's where the American people are. And shame on Congress if we continue to talk about some basic little reform here and there, while our own people, our own Marimars, our own Silverios, our own Keith Porters are dying under our watch.
You know, Congresswoman, I do think you make a very important point here, and I've talked to a lot of Democratic elected officials, particularly in the House and the Senate, who say, "Oh no, it's not abolish ICE. We just, want to rein them in." And in listening to this hearing today, it struck me that if the FBI, if agents in the FBI were walking around this country indiscriminately shooting Americans, snatching them up, right, in the name of what they were supposed to be doing in terms of law enforcement, I would hope that Congress would say, "Hey, Kash Patel, what's going on?" And if Kash Patel could not rein in what was going on in his organization, I would hope everyone would say, "Oh, well, okay, Pam, what you gonna do?" And give Pam some time to get it done. I'm talking about the Attorney General, Pam Bondi. And the event that Pam Bondi could not get it done, Congress, because they have the power of the purse, okay, would say, "Well, it seems as though that you are either unwilling or unable to rein in this organization within your agency. So because of that, we as Congress, we're just not going to fund them until further notice. And we're going to take back the money we have appropriated until we decide you all are ready to be funded." To me, Americans are being snatched up in the streets. Children are being detained. Like, I want the people to be in my email tonight and ask me, why am I yelling? I'm yelling because this is insane. So what the hell are Democrats doing? I'm very glad the hearing happened today. The hearing only happened because of Democrats. But this is not a training issue. The agency has a problem, and Secretary Noem seems unable to address the issue. So Congress has to address it.
That's exactly right. And look, I have said since April, I was the very first member of Congress to call for her resignation. I don't care if she resigns, if Trump fires her, she's impeached. We need further accountability after she's impeached, by the way. But the point is, you can get rid of her and put Tom Homan, the corrupt leader, the border czar who's taken thousands of dollars in bribes. It's not going to change if you just start swapping people. The system itself is rotten, and the American people are yelling and asking Congress, what the hell are you going to do to keep me alive in this precise moment? They're shackling black and brown bodies around the country, and instead of putting a stop, you're going to minimize our pain to say, well, if we do a little bit more training, but we'll still give them more money. How do you possibly sleep at night, knowing that your own constituents are living in fear? Liam is back home, but Steven Martinez, an autistic boy in my district, an 8th grader, has been in detention for 6 weeks, very sick, in a facility right now that has an outbreak of measles. We cannot continue to justify this. And I think, Simone, the people are demanding for Congress to stop worrying about what a D.C. consultant is telling them and do their damn job.
Yeah, and I think Congressman Castro going and getting Liam was a very big deal, and it really did show as if someone was doing something on TV, and people rallied towards it. Jacob, quickly here, 2025, the deadliest year on ICE for record. You've done an incredible job reporting on these stories, talking about the impact that these detentions make on not only those who are rounded up, but also families. I want to read this from here. Folks who got killed in 2025 from ICE. They died of seizure and heart failure, stroke, respiratory failure, tuberculosis, or suicide. Some died at ICE detention centers and field offices. Others after they'd been transferred to hospitals, but they were still under ICE custody. In some cases, their families and lawyers have alleged they died of neglect after repeatedly trying and failing to get medical care. So here we are in the United States, richest country in the world, and people who are rounded up, sometimes are even American citizens, sometimes they have an open asylum claim, they're left to die.
I would say it's not just in ICE custody also, Luke. I just want to remind everybody of the story of Nori Santai Ramos that we brought to you on this network at the beginning of this operation in the summer of 2025. Nori was an AP honor student, a track star at the Miguel Contreras Learning Complex here in Los Angeles. She went for a routine immigration check-in with her mother, Estela. Here in LA, they were deported to Guatemala, a place Nori hadn't been to since she was a little kid. And Nori says they deported her mom without her medication. And just weeks after we went to visit both of them in Guatemala, Estela Ramos died, leaving Nori, who hadn't been in Guatemala since she was a child, alone without her mother. So we talked about 32, I think is the number that you cited. There's one more, and I guarantee you if there's an Estela, there are more Estelas out there. And the killings of Renee Nicole Good and Alex Preddy are not the only ones as well. Remember, immigrants have died during these operations in the field, too, whether it was someone in Oxnard, California falling off of a roof or a migrant running across the 210 freeway away from the Border Patrol after being chased from a Home Depot. This is much more wide scale than we're talking about and that people really understand, and that's why it's time to pay attention.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. As you know, it is already 2026. We're in the midterm election year. 9 months away from Election Day. 9 months today. And Donald Trump and members of his administration are already making moves to try to illegitimately take control of the American election system. Now, Trump doesn't want Republicans to lose the House and the Senate. One big reason in particular, I think, that he keeps making very clear.
You got to win the midterms, because if we don't win the midterms, it's just going to be, I mean, they'll find a reason to impeach me. I'll get impeached.
I don't think he's wrong, and I really think he's very obsessed with legacy right now, that he does not want to go for his third impeachment. He's obsessed with keeping control of Congress. I think, honestly, primarily for that reason, because it's not like he cares about passing legislation or cares about other people's electoral fortunes. But the thing is, he's obsessed about keeping Congress, and he has no real plan to do it normally or legitimately, right? I mean, despite all the bravado and the constant boasts about never being more popular, they know the score. The administration actually understands that Trump is in trouble. The Republican Party is in trouble. And it's not just polling. Look at this. You might have seen this over the weekend. A Texas special election that happened over the weekend in which a Democrat flipped a red state Senate seat, winning by 14 points in a district Trump carried by 17 points in 2024. That's a 31-point swing. That is almost literally unheard of. Now, don't expect a blowout like that in November. You're going to have turnout that's going to be much higher. That was a low turnout election. Democrats tend to do better in those. But even a 10-point swing in the midterms would wipe out the Republican majority. Heck, a 5-point swing in the midterms would wipe out the Republican House majority. So they know what they're facing. They see the writing on the walls. And they know they don't right now, unless things change dramatically, have a path to just outright winning a free and fair election. I mean, most normal incumbents who aren't Donald Trump see their party suffer losses in the midterms, right? So Donald Trump is exploring other plans. The first plan was to gerrymander congressional maps. Why leave it up to voters to choose Republicans when Republicans could simply choose their voters? And so Donald Trump tenaciously, constantly pushed red states to redraw their districts to be even redder, right? To change their congressional districts mid-decade. This never happens, right? Texas did it. Missouri did it. Ohio still may. But Trump's pressure generated a backlash. First, among Republicans in, for instance, Indiana, who just told him to take a hike, wouldn't do what he wanted, despite J.D. Vance going there in person, inviting him to the White House, right? And also in blue states like California, which defensively redrew its maps. And so when all is said and done, between California, what's happening in Virginia, maybe Maryland, the fact Indiana wouldn't do it, the whole thing made the gerrymandering war a wash. It could actually, in the end up net benefiting the Democrats because Donald Trump started this fight. So now midterm election year is upon us. That gerrymandering plan has really failed. I think they thought this was like their secret weapon, right? Their ace in the hole. No. So now it's time for the Republican plan B. And that is, and they're saying this out loud, to fully seize the machinery of American voting. I mean, last week they started moving on this project in Fulton County, Georgia, where FBI agents raided the election office and left with nearly 700 boxes of ballots. That's all under the watchful eye of Trump's director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Her spokeswoman told MS Now Trump has ordered Gabbard to investigate election security nationwide, even though she has no domestic law enforcement powers, and even though after the 1970s we have a bunch of laws and regulations to separate domestic law enforcement from international intelligence. That's actually really important. Now, former officials say that this is preposterous, and they also fear it's part of a plan to attempt to steal the midterms. Remember, Fulton County in Georgia, right, which contains Atlanta, was ground zero for Trump's 2020 election lies. Those were lies pushed by people like, for instance, former Trump aide Roger Stone, who posted a photo of himself with J.D. Vance just yesterday. Stone said they chatted, but didn't say what they chatted about. Also lies pushed by former Trump lawyer Sidney Powell, remember her, who was seen just after the Georgia raid last week with Trump DOJ official Ed Martin. And remember, it was Powell, along with disgraced former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and the former CEO of Overstock.com, Patrick Byrne, remember that guy, who all marched into the Oval Office in December 2020 and told Trump to seize voting machines and declare victory. Well, late last month, the former Overstock guy, Patrick Byrne, reportedly accepted an invitation to the White House. And over the weekend, guess what? He praised the Fulton County raid.
It looks like maybe you and Sidney Powell and a couple other people had the right idea way back when.
Yes, it's oddly enough, it's exactly what we were asking him to do December 18th, 2020. And what I thought he was going to do the first week he was back in power, it took him a year and a week. And that's a measure not of Trump, but of the deep state.
Right. Now, you might be asking yourself, I particularly asked myself this when I saw Roger Stone post that photo with J.D. Vance. Why are all the usual suspects from the 2020 attempted coup back in Trump's orbit now? Maybe to give it another run, to try to rig future elections in the name of the 2020 election. I mean, just yesterday, Donald Trump was complaining about winning more states in 2020 on the podcast of his former FBI number 2, Dan Bongino. Dan Bongino, who hated his job, apparently actually doing like government work and now wants to go back to podcasting. Trump adding, quote, "We should take over the voting in 15 places. The Republicans ought to nationalize the voting." Now, that, of course, is illegal. It's a violation of all sorts of state federal statutes and constitutional principles of federalism. But today, of course, Trump just doubled down.
What exactly did you mean when you said that you should nationalize elections? And which 15 states are you talking about?
I want to see elections be honest. And if a state can't run an election, I think the people behind me should do something about it. Because, you know, if you think about it, a state is an agent for the federal government in elections. I don't know why the federal government doesn't do them anyway. But when you see some of these states about how horribly they run their elections, what a disgrace it is, I think the federal government, when you see crooked elections, and we had plenty of them, and by the way, we had them last time, but go to 2020 and look at the facts that are coming out. Rigged, crooked elections. If we have areas, take a look at Detroit, take a look at Pennsylvania, take a look at Philadelphia. You go take a look at Atlanta. Look at some of the places that horrible corruption on elections. And the federal government should not allow that. The federal government should get involved. These are agents of the federal government to count the votes. If they can't count the votes legally and honestly, then somebody else should take over.
Now, keep in mind, I mean, these are all lies, right? And this is a guy who has said he thinks he won California multiple times. I mean, it's like meeting someone and them telling you like they can fly like Superman, or me just like telling you like, oh yeah, I'm 7 feet 4 inches. Like, what do you do with that? That's a person who is, I don't know, diagnosable in some way, something, right? This is the guy who told Georgia's election supervisor to find him 11,000 votes. He's worried about the states counting their votes. You can see why, right? Because they counted them accurately. So last week, Republicans unveiled a Make Elections Great Again bill to put new limits on voting by mail and voter registration drives, as well as mandate voter ID issued by the federal government, as well as new voter surveillance programs. Who's going to stop it? Well, definitely not the Speaker of the House, a guy who voted against certifying the 2020 election, who is an election denier, and got back to his election truther roots on Capitol Hill today.
We know it's in our system. The states have been in charge of administering their elections. What you're hearing from the president is his frustration about the lack of some of the blue states, frankly, of enforcing these things and making sure that they are free and fair elections. We had 3 House Republican candidates who were ahead on Election Day in the last election cycle. And every time a new tranche of ballots came in, they just magically whittled away until their leads were lost. It looks on its face to be fraudulent. Can I prove that? No, because it happened so far upstream.
Okay. I mean, the reason they lost was because the votes came in that had more Democrats voting for the person. But they don't like that, right? I mean, that's the key thing, right? Mike Johnson, Donald Trump, all of them together agree on this point. They don't want people to choose who gets to win elections. They want to say who wins elections so that they never have to lose an election. And the entire definition of a democracy is a system in which the ruling party can lose an election. That's it. That's the one-sentence democracy. They don't like it. And remember, in addition to all this, masked armed federal agents are disappearing people off the streets in multiple cities. They're terrorizing people into staying homes. They are shooting law-abiding observers, killing them in some cases, while the administration tells states like Minnesota and Pennsylvania they'll call off the dogs if those blue states hand over their most private, granular voting data. Pam Bondi gave away the game here, right? Those masked agents running amok in your city who killed 2 of your citizens, who account for 66% of the homicides in the city of Minneapolis, yeah, maybe we can tell them to leave if you give us the voting data. So again, connect the dots here. They're not exactly like, using excessive subterfuge. All of their eggs are now in this basket. The gerrymandering didn't work. They just got their butts kicked in a plus 14 Trump district. Donald Trump and his allies are not planning on getting more popular before November. They are now hell-bent on going farther than they could in 2020.